Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of Voices for Excellence. I am your host, Dr. Michael Connor, CEO and founder of the Agile Evolutionary Group, and your proud host for VFE. And today it is an absolute honor to have Dr. Shawna Dinkins on VFE. Now, we are here. It's the we're not worthy type of having Dr. Dinkins here. Dr. Dinkins is a leading voice, a staunch equity and innovation voice within the ecosystem, as well as really carry the necessary vitality in order to make conditional changes, right? Conditional changes with regards to structures and systems for all. So it is an absolute honor to have Dr. Shawna Dinkins, the proud Deputy Superintendent of Lynwood Unified School District in Lynwood, California. Dr. Dinkins, I am so happy you are on VFE. It is great to have you.
It is great to be here. Always a pleasure to be in your presence. And I'm so honored that you invited me. Thank you for having me.
I'm so honored that you accepted the invitation, because to my audience out there, Dr. Dinkins and I, when we have conversations, the conversations really get deep into the genetic structures of how we can really change our systems from an equity standpoint. And some of the conversations that we have had, I said it would be absolutely selfish just to keep this contained to Dr. Dinkins and I, because we want to be able to now know we talk strategies, we talk methods, and we get really real about equity. And, you know, the last discussion that we had, Dr. Dinkins, that's when I said, I got to have you on the podcast, because I know that my viewers and my listeners, they use this as an asynchronous tool for professional learning, and for them to actually go back and to unwrap some of the strategies and leadership ideologies that you're going to present, Dr. Dinkins. I tell you, I had to share it with the world, sis.
I don't know why you thought of me, but again, I'm honored.
I'm so glad to have you here. So let's get right into the podcast now. Dr. Dinkins, you have made significant, and I mean significant, contributions in the education landscape, significant contributions in the context of some of these paradigm shifts that we're seeing in education, specifically grounded in the meta themes of innovation, excellence, and equity. So as a voice in California and across this country, you serving in the role as Deputy Superintendent in Lynwood, what song, I can't wait for this, what song education stakeholders highlight when they are describing Dr. Shawna Dinkins?
Well, my personal anthem is I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan.
You brought it back to Shaka. Okay.
But if I had to talk about Lynwood students, my song would be You're Simply the Best by the rest in peace, Tina Turner, because that's how I feel about the work that I do. And that's how I feel about the students and families that I serve. They are the best, and they deserve the best.
Absolutely. And Dr. Dinkins, it doesn't surprise me that you brought out history here. Shaka and Tina. Now, that is a first for VFE, when you got this synonymous of Shaka and Tina work together. I'm Every Woman, and you are simply the best, because it is completely true about your work, what you do, your morals, your values as a leader that incorporates and encompasses all, absolutely, because you certainly do make students feel simply the best. And I got to see that at the Council Academy for Leadership and Innovation, where Lynwood was a host site for us, and we'll get into that. But I am Every Woman, yes, and that is great, because I'll tell you this, Dr. Dinkins, you know, if I had a choice, right, if there's this, and I say this very limited, you know, my son's education is huge for me. And knowing that song, I'm Every Woman, I know that I would be able to put Mikey and Lynwood and under your leadership and Dr. Budiel Cortright, yes, I would love to have, Mikey in Lynwood with that. But that's just me from a personal sense. But, the work that you're doing is true, Dr. Dinkins, because when I hear you speak about equity, when I hear you speak about excellence and the way you advocate for students, it's contagious and it is envious. So thank you for your work on that. So much respect from here, Dr. Dinkins. But I want to talk about the grant that you secured, right? And I discussed this when we were at the Council Academy for Leadership and Innovation, right? And you secured a multi-million-dollar grant for all schools. Wait, let me rephrase that, right? And that was an anomaly. And I know about that grant that you filled out and your team. Congratulations. But that multi-million-dollar grant for Lynwood Unified School District to become a district of community schools. Now, a lot of people outside of California, right, might not know the definition or the construct of the community school model and the competitive grant that Lynwood achieved and received. So you spent a lot of time, right, working and investing to secure that competitive grant for your community. That right there is excellence and equity defined at its core. But in the AC stage of education, right, we're trying to move to this whole child, whole school, whole community approach to support students and families in this new paradigm. So for my listeners, Dr. Dinkins, what is the Community School Design and Initiative? And if I cannot, right, if I'm an executive leader or leader, and if I cannot secure grants to underscore this type of design or this type of model, or it might exceed my operating budget, how would I be able to leverage innovation to start and scale this model in my district?
So first and foremost, community schools is grounded in 4 pillars. Those 4 pillars are social and emotional learning, culturally responsive classrooms, making sure that there are resources and adequate staffing for mental health, and making sure that basic needs such as food scarcity, housing, all of those needs are met with resources.
Absolutely. Now, just to unwrap, right, the community school model and design and the 4 supporting pillars to be able to leverage this type of innovative design within the district, I want to focus on one of the pillars that you highlighted, right? And this is of a sub-question, mental health. And we have seen across the country, right, we've seen an increase of suspensions, exclusion, and I like to say exclusions beyond the state mandated duration for a suspension, right? When we start seeing this, right, and we start seeing the cumulative of time out of school, which more in lies, it defies or the antithesis of inclusion. When we look at mental health and really go deep into it, the depth and breadth of mental health, I know you are one of the leading experts in California that addresses mental health and equity in a synonymous context. What does this look like to be able to now to start supporting our students, specifically if it's undergirded with a community school design?
Well, specifically, that last question that you asked me, how do you do it without a grant? First, you got to listen to the voices of the kids, and the needs got to meet the needs of both your staff and your students. So when it comes to the mental health portion, even before the grant, we had licensed social workers, both in our students with disabilities group and within our regular group. We're now up to 9 licensed social workers. And before the community grant, I also had 42 health collaborative partners. Those partners are all resources for counseling services, not just for students, but also for families. And so now the grant gives me an opportunity. This is going to sound weird, but it actually gives me an opportunity to decentralize services. And what that means is, instead of someone needing to come to the district office, whether it's our food bank, whether it's for one of our health collaboratives, whether it's to sign up for counseling, all of that will be centralized now at each school site. So one of my high schools, we are in that grant with the county, but the work is the same. And the grant brings additional resources. So I will have a community specialist at every school who will coordinate all of those resources for students at point of need. And I think that's important, especially in a community such as Lynwood, where you don't have people who are mobile. And what I mean by that is a lot of our parents walk their kids to school. A lot of our folks live within 4 square miles. So access, point of views, those things are crucial to getting those needed services to those students and families. So now there will be a resource, a community specialist at every school who, if I walk in today and say, my family is really struggling, we need some counseling and we need access to the food bank, what have you. And all of those resources will be given to students and families at their home school site. So when you talk about mental health, I love that my families, my students, they don't have to wait. So there's a licensed social worker at every school. There's a community specialist at every school. New this year, before the grant, we created a job called Social Emotional Learning Specialist. These are credentialed counselors who work with our PBIS, our Positive Behavior Support Systems. They implement lessons according to what the mitigated needs are of the kids. And so we have several layers of services, and I'm just happy for all of them to be cohesive and coherent in supporting our students and families.
Amazing, Dr. Dinkins. And the reason I sound kind of disjointed is just capturing all your sentiments. But one thing that resonates with me, right? And he will be in your district coming up soon, Dr. Pedro Noguera out of your California.
We love Dr. Noguera. He's a partner with Lynwood. We love him.
I tell you, I reference his work in my literature review within my dissertation. But one thing that resonates with me, right? And this is directly coming from, or a direct quote from Dr. Noguera, and it resonates with me, and it still resonates with me years later, is if students' basic needs are not met, they're not going to learn in the academic environment.
That's right.
Everything that you have just outlined, including a reverse strategy of this decentralizing services, that goes down to this level of customization with resources to now ensure that we are truly meeting the excellence and equity needs for all. The human resources that you have incorporated into Lynwood, coupling being strategic about the alignment of health collaborative partners, as well as those resources specifically focused on well-being and mental health, is just absolutely commendable. Now, Dr. Dinkins, and again, this is another sub-question that I want to be able to ask. And this goes online with one of the pillars again, because I think that this is a core impetus, right, within the education ecosystem. And it's around culturally responsive practices environments,
Yes.
right, around that pillar. There's multiple interpretations within culturally responsive practices, culturally responsive environments, developing culturally responsive systems in totality and holistically. But can you, from a community school's lens, unwrap what that context means with regards to culturally responsive environments and practices?
Yes, I'm going to start with the district's mission, vision, objectives, and goals. And part of that mission is making sure that we have access, equity, and justice. And so in your book, you referenced that equity means all students, all students. And that's what we mean when we say that. So in that framework, in meeting, going back to Noguera's work, is Maslow's before Bloom's, right?
Yep.
If I'm having home insecurity, food insecurity, I'm not listening to anything you have to say. So one of the things we've done in Lynwood for several years, we've had trauma-informed practices trainings with our teachers, but the culturally responsive piece is so important to the relationships, because it's not just knowing your students. That relationships is part of equity, right? Because in Lynwood, equity means giving students what they need when they need it, and it doesn't preclude taking something from someone else at all. And so when you talk about equity and access and justice and culturally responsive pedagogy, they're not monoliths. They're not exclusive of one another. So now when you come to the academics, it's just like Maslow's to me. Students have to feel affirmed, valued, and seen, right? So if I'm teaching you and you don't see yourself, your lived experiences, your ancestors' lived experience represented anywhere in this K-12 system that we call school, I think that's detrimental, especially when, like in your report, you were talking about 2030, especially when more than half of the kids in our school system, public school system, will be brown and Black students. So for me, it is imperative, it is urgent right now that we start addressing those dynamics and moving those levers in the classroom. And it's more than knowing who your students are. It's knowing what they need. And you got to go a little bit deeper to get to those needs because, they're not going to be real upfront about telling you that. And it's going to be some exploration, some discovery. And assessment is a bad word, but we absolutely need it. I don't think assessment is bad. I think how you leverage assessment is what gives it the wrong name. But in that culturally responsive framework, we have strategies, we have inclusive curriculum, we are implementing in Lynwood. A lot of people are not aware of social justice centers with four identity, culture, community. All of those pillars are in the social justice standards. We have a core group of teachers who have incorporated. See, this is what I love about Lynwood. I'm not trying to take anything away. In my framework, if these are the standards the kids have to learn, then let me find the inclusivity within it, right? I'm not going to give you more to do. I'm just going to refine and expand the framework because you cannot tell kids to master standards that they cannot connect to. So you have to include every kid, every group, and as best you can, every lived experience to move that academic and the social emotional lever for kids.
Absolutely. And to my audience out there, that is one of the most simplified, albeit accurate definition of culturally responsive practices. So Dr. Dinkins, I like, again, as I stated from the outset, I like to use the podcast as a professional learning tool. And somebody that we commonly use, Patty's work, right? And the effect size of direct instruction, 0.6, but using this in an asynchronous manner. So to my audience, please go back and listen to that definition of what culturally responsive practices and systems can be, specifically from the context of how Lynwood is implementing those practices in a very strategic and measured way. Now, one thing that I want to focus on that Dr. Dinkins highlighted was relationships, right? And Dr. Dinkins, a mutual friend of ours, Dr. Louvel Brown, Superintendent of Ithaca, New York, he always state that, kids always state that, how can you teach me if you do not know me? And that is so true, Dr. Dinkins, with that. And the social justice standards, if anybody really wants to learn about what equity, inclusion, and justice look like, please go out to Lynwood. But I want to underscore this, right? Because you talked about the equity piece. Now I want to get into one of my subjective, right? I would say one of my subjective favorites is around innovation. Now, I was out in Lynwood. I had the chance to be out there for the Council Academy for Leadership and Innovation, co-facilitating that with Xandra Jo Galvin, who has just matriculated or will be matriculating out of the presidency from CALSA. She did a wonderful, wonderful job in establishing the CALSA Academy for Leadership and Innovation. But like I said, I was humbled because when I talk about my framework in my book, Intentional, Bold, and Unapologetic, a guide to transforming schools in the AC stage of education, when I see my framework in action, when you start applying the theoretical threads the way you want it to lead to the serial disruption of a divergency of the traditional education experience for students, I saw that in Lynwood, right? And I was humbled to actually see that. And Dr. Dinkins, I'm not going to lie, when I heard a 17-year-old student giving their project or outlining their project to about 40 adults that they all did not know, perfect articulation, lucid with the presentation. But more importantly, what impressed me, because I like to say a computer science geek, the student was unwrapping his computer aided design, his CAD, and was talking about how he was creating it on Python. Time out. Wait, hold up. I was like, no. I was like, I'm a fan. I am an absolute fan of the development of the robots and the coding and the algorithms that students were engaging in. This is AC stage of education because it's preparing them, I like to say, for not just college ready, but career ready and digital ready, right? Yes. So for my audience, can you highlight, right? Because I always, my theory in my book is you need multiple micro innovations, right? Multiple coherent processes, going on simultaneously to reach that level of meta disruption, architectural and serial designs or discontinuous change within my book, where now the experience looked like what I saw in Lynwood. So just for my audience, can you highlight that process of you moving from traditional classrooms of pedagogy to now students have this real agency within their learning, and they are developing these concepts through the problem-finding, problem-seeking approach to solve real world problems?
Yes, I'm happy to. First and foremost, you talk about this in your book. I want to say it was about chapter 4. And you talked about zip codes and how the redlining historical practices have always put our urban schools at a disadvantage. So under the leadership of my superintendent, he started the career check at technical pathways, educational pathways several years ago. We have 8 and I have 3 more in the works. So after we decided that this is what we're going to do, we then went and talked to our staff, found out one of our teachers, who was actually a math teacher, actually had a degree in engineering. And man, when I tell you, some of that work you saw with the CAD, the coding, the robots, that's all to the experience and knowledge of our teacher, Mr. Uday, who took his kids to Skill USA for the first time and won. We're so just absolutely proud.
And shout out to Mr. Uday. I want to give a shout out to Uday. I remember I met him. Brother, you got it going on and keep that going.
Yes, he does. So, I'm going to try to break it down. So the first thing is meeting students' needs. When you talk about the workforce and how it's changing, especially after COVID, AC, right? And all the jobs that are going and skill sets that are going to be needed by our students who leave our system. So then you start getting the students engaged. And oh my God, when you walked into computer science, when you walked into the engineering class, the engagement was like, it was so obvious, it didn't need to be explained, right? But that comes because you got teachers who have a core belief that our kids can. So you got to have the belief. You got to undo those traditional fixed mindsets and have the belief that, yes, they're in an urban school. Yes, test scores don't always demonstrate a student's capacity to learn. And if you get stuck in the data and you don't get to the root cause analysis of why kids are not successful in school, you'll just be on the hamster wheel, right? So you got to take the deep dive into data. You got to leverage student interest. You got to engage students. You got to meal and hone the capacity, the craft, and the talent of our teachers, because a lot of our teachers can do more than you think. Like, can you imagine Mr. Uday, who was a civil engineer, just teaching math? Like, come on, you got to expand and refine what our teachers also bring. And even in our computer science class, that was a former English teacher who thought this is an opportunity. And he went and self-learned and self-taught and got certificated so that he can teach that computer science class. So you just got to change the system. And this is how I look at it. I think the Industrial Revolution created an educational system where there were winners and losers. I think the new system, in its myriad of functions, needs to be responsive to community and student and needs, right? We see the needs, we see the market, And I think we have to no longer expect our students to respond to a system that doesn't serve them. You got to create the system that serves them. And when you do that, that is when you'll see that student engagement, that academic attainment. You'll see all those things soar. But you got to have a mindset that that's possible. And then you got to create the supports. So we have tutoring, we have mentorships. I'm proud to say in the fall, we have a pilot entrepreneurship class that's going to teach. Yeah, entrepreneurship is the next.
It is.
It's the next pathway for us. It's teaching kids how to own businesses, how to operate, write a business plan, and trying to get a partner to come in and give those apprenticeships and those internships to our kids. So I'll be honest, it starts with mindset. But then I want to reference something in your book. When you do that big, deep data dive, you got to have some uncomfortable conversations.
Yes.
So, Dr. Connor, they weren't uncomfortable for me. But keeping that in mind, they are uncomfortable for others because we've all benefited from a system that wasn't designed for us. Yeah. So you got to think outside the box. Like, it worked for me, but I don't want to be the exception. I want to be the rule. Yeah. So how do I make kids' academic attainment and success the rule and not the in spite of? So that's just really important. And you got to look at your data and you got to talk to your collective community. You got to talk to parents about their expectations. You got to talk to students. You got to talk to teachers. You got to talk to your classified staff. It takes everybody to make that innovation work. I know I said a lot.
No. Please, Dr. Dinkins, I can listen to you today, but you have just unwrapped a variety of different things that I want to touch upon. But I think that, this kind of goes back to where you're at out in California, right? It's that you have successfully, and Lynwood, your team, has successfully really defined the first step in engineer design thinking, empathy, right? You started out by saying you have to listen to the various stakeholders and constituency within your district, within your organization. But kind of like this, I like to say a line variant of expectations. Wow. That's going to be my kind of like my sub question going into it after I kind of summarize this, but expectations and empathy, right? When you talk about, design thinking is hearing or listening to your most important customers. I like to say students and families, right? And community. Expectations, ensuring that all students can learn, all students deserve this, quote unquote definition of quality, define it to your specific context. And you're right, winners and losers within the industrial model when I look at engagement versus compliance, right? Because one thing that you've highlighted, and this can be a controversial statement, albeit it can be grounded on multiple metrics that are out there, including summative state and federal metrics, is that I believe that students are losing their identity in the current design of the model. Edward Deming, I should say, Deming said that the system is perfectly designed for the outcomes that it's getting. The outcomes that we're getting or that we're seeing is we're seeing 54% of Black and brown students that comprise of public education, but they have I like to say, this precipitous negative regression in multiple metrics, outcomes, discipline, suspensions, exclusion, special education, whatever it may be. How do we now look at this model, this industrial model, differently? Because in theory, the theory of action, the value proposition, you have to, and I think we're at an inevitable state, we have to redesign the model comprehensively, strategically, and do it over time in the step function manner. Because students are losing their identity. 54% of public education are Black and brown. The urgency around empathy and expectation, so we move towards engagement. What does that look like, Dr. Dinkins, from an equity lens?
Well, from an equity lens, giving students what they need when they need it and not taking anything from anyone else, right? And so if I say to you, I want you to climb Mount Everest, but I'm not going to give you anything to get to the top of that mountain. That is punitive. It is a gotcha, and you're setting kids up for failure. So going back to that model, all systems are designed to get a certain outcome. So there are definite flaws within our system, but in building empathy, that empathy leads right into relationships. See, my school experience wasn't that of the school experience of the students in Lynwood. And it's okay. It's okay that I had a different experience. I think what matters is that I want what I had to be the norm. And I look at the kids and the students and the students and the staff and the teachers, and I think to myself, uh-oh, there you are, sorry.
Yeah.
I think to myself, if they were sitting in a classroom in Beverly Hills, they were sitting in a classroom in Palos Verdes, would your mindset be different about who you're teaching? Just imagine if you had to teach your whole class asynchronously and you never saw the faces of your kids. Would you do something differently? So see, those are the hard questions we have to ask ourselves because our kids deserve the best. So you start with that empathy. The way you keep identity is you tie in new learning to something students already know. That's the heartbeat of culturally responsive teaching. I forgot the scientist who said, in order to attain new learning, you have to attach it to something that is familiar already. And I'm not saying you have to flip the curriculum on its ear, but you do need to make the curriculum inclusive where kids see themselves. See, that's identity. Because we've lost some of the art of storytelling. A lot of our history is not in books, believe it or not. And a lot of stuff in the books is not exactly accurate. And our kids shouldn't have to wait to college to learn about the Tulsa Black Wall Street and all those great things, right? So I'm not saying that teaching kids about their identity is only in curriculum, but it's in the relationship. And I don't think you can have equity or empathy without a relationship, not just knowing your students, but knowing what their sweet spots are, right? Like if I ask a student, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he tells me, I want to be an engineer. And I ought to have the resource. See that Mount Everest? Mount Everest is the engineer. So in my mind, the system needs to create that pathway to make sure that when that kid leaves us, they are equipped with the skill, the capacity, and the interpersonal skill to go into the workforce and make a livable wage and take care of their families. But most importantly, here is the investment. You want students. This is why their experience in school is so important, Dr. Connor, because you want them to come back. See, this is the part we don't talk about often. In communities like Lynwood, I don't want you to go. I want you to go, grow, and come back and plant some more seeds. See, when our kids are sitting in English class and they see the 5 kids who are Lynwood alumni who are at Stanford right now getting their master's degrees in various areas, that is the hope. And we used to say hope is a strategy. No, it isn't. Hope is the lever of the change. And we got to give the kids hope. We got to keep them in their identity. And we have to give them the resources to make those dreams a reality.
Absolutely. I'm going to use that, Dr. Dinkins. Hope is the lever of change, right? Because
yes.
I think that we have to have incorporate a lot of hope into education. And when you were highlighting your students, that Saturday morning, it was at the CAUSA Academy. And before my content session, we had a student-led group of current Lynwood students and former, and this is when we talk about the relationships, right? Former students, former graduates of Lynwood who are currently in high-powered, high-level engineering programs. I believe one student was at USC. It was I can't remember, but obviously some of the top colleges across the country. And what was great about it was they're Black and brown students, right? And students who historically within the industrial model, the industrial design, when we talk about the system is perfectly designed for its outcomes, those students would not historically have been successful. They would have been excluded, but they defied the norms because of the leadership, because of the construct, the governance policies, as well as the practices that are being concretized in Lynwood. We're seeing now that cycle being broken. But I think the broader question becomes, Dr. Dinkins, is how do we now start mobilizing those type of practices universally so that the coalition is deep and the ecosystem universally, not in this ad hoc manner, but universally be applied in these specific with these specific practices. Relationships. I don't think, Dr. Dinkins, we really take relationships as a foundational piece for fundamental change in education. What do you think?
Yes, I will say in expanding our ecosystem in Lynwood, we wrote a grant. I'll talk about seeking monies to do these things later, but we wrote another grant where we are able to establish an alumni relations center. So talk about ecosystems. That alumni center will be open on evenings and weekends.
Hey.
People in the Lynwood community, if they need to complete their FAFSA, their college app, if they just need support, because a lot of our students, Lynwood's 4 square miles. A lot of our students that don't know a lived experience outside of their city. So they get to Stanford and they get to Dartmouth and they get to some of those private colleges and institutions, and they're a little, dare I say, disconnected. So that is the connection to relationships, right? So now we have this resource where if I'm somewhere and I'm from Lynwood and I need to talk to someone who's walked this path, there's an alumni center. I can call, I can do a Zoom with someone who's an alumni. It's going to be staffed with alumni. And the big project we're trying to do is there are a lot of famous celebrities from Lynwood. I think that's great. I need them to come back, donate, and raise money so that we can keep the ecosystem going. But there are a lot of successful PhD kids out of Lynwood. And those are the kids I need to come back. Those are the alumni I need to come back and plant some seeds and show our Lynwood community that they're so. I had a kid who ended up in our continuation school, was a gang member. I mean, everything you could think of, you could put his name to it. He just got his doctorate degree, and he's coming back and sowing the seeds until our Lynwood community say, you know what? It is never too late. This is a great place filled with resources, and I can do it. You can do it too. But it's keeping that connection with those who have come out of the system and have found success so that we can keep building the success. See, that's the construct. You don't change a community by leaving. Like I said, I want you to go. I want you to grow, but you got to come back and plant some more seeds until the harvest is plentiful and full. And how I think we create that on a national level is in those frameworks of disruption that, as you have so eloquently written in your book, it's in the frameworks of community schools, because in all of that is the disruption. I think when people hear disruption, they think rallies and protest and, coming to board meetings and acting a complete, what, but that's not where change happens. Right. Change happens in classrooms and change happens in systems. And I don't begrudge those folks who are advocates. We need that too. But if you're talking about real disruption, it's the innovative practices and it's changing the systems to support those practices. We don't want it to be a gimmick. We want deeply rooted seeds in the ground so that long after Dr. Dinkins is gone, long after Dr. Crossway is gone, we have created a system where kids are supported. They know their identity. They're confident in who they are, and they believe that they can do it. So we got to keep it going. But you don't keep it going unless you create the system.
Wow. And Dr. Dinkins, thank you, right, for the kind words. And then also I love your interpretation and definition of disruption because, when I look at disruption and underscoring your statement within your answer, disruption is essentially two things. And one, it is exactly what you stated. It's not blowing up the place. It's not, you're turning it upside down in a day. It really is assessing these meta drivers as signals for transformation or for fundamental change. You're assessing, right? And that's where you talk about using the data in this context of big data, and I like to say in an inexactitude manner for analysis, where conversations and discussions are going to be very uncomfortable because when you start unwrapping the data metrics to get to the root cause, you start looking at the genetic structures and systems of a system to transform it. That's when you have conversations around equity. But you are absolutely correct with that, because I want to get into the next question, because this basically underpins this focus around expectations for students, change in the culture and the mindset of an organization. But now is the time that we really have to start systematizing practices of equity and excellence. This is an alignment to the excellence loop from my book, those core elements that me. And I always, within my research, the theory is if you can reach two or more of the elements within the excellence loop, you're reaching this level of anti-marginalization where now you're putting a focus on the historically excluded student groups. That right there, Dr. Dinkins, just what I just said, has just been negatively exploited explicitly and implicitly within the ecosystem. To be honest with you, right, we have these great conversations, you and I, of how we can do that, right? How we can actually ensure that these practices work in a symbiotic manner within the ecosystem. But let's be real, a lot of people are scared to address this, or they look at it as not as a priority focus, where yes, teacher shortage is important. That's one example that we're facing. We're facing a lot of conundrums in education, but I think that what's inevitable is that we have to be able to include an equity and inclusive strategy, even if we're looking at the elements of the excellence loop. So if I'm a leader, Dr. Dinkins, right, and I know I got to address this, right, because the longer that we keep kicking the can down the road, the bigger the issue becomes. So if I'm a leader, how do I prioritize excellence and equity work, knowing that there will be negative forces and drivers that will attempt to A, stagnate, B, bottleneck, and C, eliminate the need for Generation Z and Generation Alpha?
Yeah. That's a tough one. I'll be honest. When I'm on fire for the kids, which is 95%.
Yes, you are, Doc.
You actually said something in your book that I live by, right? I care so much about kids. I tolerate adults. I love kids. That's what I say.
Yeah, I love the kids.
I love kids, and it's my sweet spot. It's my favorite place to be. Adults, but the reality is the work is challenging. Now, I will say I'm blessed to be in Lynwood. I don't have protests and challenges to the work. I don't. But zooming out in a global context, if you're talking about changing the trajectory for Black and brown students, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. And I think I think a lot of policies just about what school is from a national and local level have to change. I'll give you an example. And this sounds very petty, but I'm going to give you an example, right? So after COVID, during COVID and after COVID, in urban communities, Lynwood lost 1 in 400 people. Now, this is a community of 72,000. 1 in 400 died during COVID. Wow. So let me talk about the after effects of that. Yeah. So when I'm living in a multi-generational home, and I lost an uncle and an aunt, I didn't just lose family. I lost 2 streams of income. So see, here and now is the game changer, because now I had to work during COVID to keep my family from being hungry and homeless. And after COVID, I still need to work. So now I'm still dealing with the grief and the trauma of losing loved ones. I now have the pressure and the burden to take care of my kids. You got the state saying if the kids need mental health, give it to them. But then you turn around and you punish the districts for chronic absenteeism. So I'm going to use that for a second, because I think in innovation, we got to talk about these archaic policies, what the school attendance need to look like versus what it is, right? Why can't there be, in your book, you talk about the chat GPT and all the artificial intelligence and effective asynchronous and synchronous environments. We have to change the game. So what do we do for a kid who has a 4.0, but who needs to work, doesn't want to miss school, wants their degree? What do we do for those kids? How do we change the system? Going back to that initial conversation, to be responsive to the needs of kids. And it's a scary conversation, because a lot of power and a lot of status and political things would really have to change in the way that we do school. And it's all rooted in money. How are we going to get ADA? How are we going to make sure that kids are getting an education while they work? But yet on the other side of it, we're talking about the world of work and how important certain things are. So I think on a global level, we have to keep pushing the conversation. I think the protests are distractions from the work. I think you got to be willing to lose your job. I'm not a superintendent yet, but I may have to be willing to lose my job. I mean, because that is the real change. You have to do. I think people fight because they want to be right. And I'm more focused on doing the right thing for kids. And I think that's where the disengagement and the dissonance starts, because what I think is the right thing for kids may not align with someone else's values or importance about what the right thing for kids is. But if you got to do the right things for kids, you got to listen to the practitioners. We're the ones in the classrooms with them. We're the ones who are seeing the needs. You know, your kids are in school 6.5 to 8 hours a day with adults who try to know them, who they talk to about their issues. And so we have to close the opportunity gaps. You talk about performance gaps in your framework, but we also have to close opportunity gaps. We have to close access gaps. And most importantly, when we take care of those things and closing those performance gaps. But I wish I had a succinct, concise, and clear answer, but I think you just got to keep getting in that good trouble.
Absolutely. That's in John Lewis, good trouble. And it's great to see that
Yes.
we got a step, right? Japanese that is out. But you highlighted on, I think, a critical notion that will actually start this, I like to say, meta-ruption process, right? And some of these meta trends in education differently is around policy. And once we start unwrapping policy at the national, state, and local levels, then we'll be able to move from that innovation to equity. I love the attendance and chronic absenteeism example, because this is what I have been advocating for, and I think that is going to become inevitable. Just like we saw some of these new practices, I like innovation science and business science being incorporated into education. But what I really like about this is that you provide a clear example of how policy, even though it is meant to improve, albeit implicitly it is exacerbating inequities. As an example, school attendance. The current construct in the design, as we talk about, is time, place, and learning are triangulated and integrated, meaning Dr. Dinkins, Dr. Connor, it doesn't matter. Your home condition, it doesn't matter. When we talk about Bloom's, the level of taxonomy or rigor, it doesn't matter when it comes to Maslow. You and I have to be in school at this certain hour, learning the same thing at the same place. But in the AC stage of education, if we truly want to meet this level of equity and excellence, time, learning, and place have to not be integrated or triangulated, but looked at as each individual entity for a student to meet his or her needs from that level of equity, meaning we're grounding these new variables in this model where all needs are being met. Not necessarily, Dr. Dinkins, we might have the same time, right, for learning. We might have it at a different learning space based off of our interest that generates engagement. And then when we talk about place, yes, we'll meet at the same place with school, but also there are different other environments where that learning is taking place at various times. I hope we get there, Dr. Dinkins, because if we have the ability, we're seeing I saw elements of it in Lynwood, but it has to go beyond the confines of Lynwood, and it has to go across the 49 other states that we have within the country. So absolutely, yes. I can talk all day about that time, place, learning, integrated agency, but that's another episode. But Dr. Dinkins, last question, right? Okay. Last question, take it as it is, break the rules, good trouble on this question, okay? But what 3 words, just 3 words. Now, again, like I said, take it as it is, good trouble. I'm only saying 3 words, but do what you need to do. But what 3 words do every leader need to be successful in the AC stage of education in the context of leadership, innovation, and equity for change? What 3 words do you want today's audience to leave with regarding equity for systemic change in the AC stage of education?
Oof. Okay. I thought about this all night. And I don't know if this is going to be profound, but the first word that comes is intentional.
Yes.
Lynwood has been very intentional. 2017, removing all barriers to the prerequisites for AP classes. Mm-hmm. See, that's disruption. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So intentionality, be strategic.
Yes.
And in alignment with bold and courage, the bold, you have to have a Mount Everest belief that kids can, no matter what. So strategic, intentional belief.
Absolutely. And Dr. Dinkins, that's another one I'm going to take from you. I said I'm going to take hope is the lever for change, and I'm going to take this one. You got to have a Mount Everest belief. That right there captures expectations in the excellence loop. It captures access because you change the mindset of an organization. You change the mindset of the stakeholders that operationalize and optimize. I like to say next practices, moving beyond best practices, and a teaching and learning organization. That's where now you're going to start leading to meeting the needs of all students. So, Dr. Shawna Dinkins, you made it through BFE.
So happy you had me on. I hope that I was of service to what it is we're trying to do professional development-wise for our folks in education. And, I do believe post-COVID, I may be retired by the time we finish unraveling. But I want my legacy to be a blessing to others. And so any of your listeners who want to visit Lynwood, have a roundtable conversation about how to get started, I want to offer Lynwood as a place for them to come and learn all about the wonderful things we're doing and how we're working diligently to make these things systemic and not one-off things for our children and families.
Absolutely. And Dr. Dinkins, I would say between You and Dr. Crossway have been just absolutely phenomenal. I'm just going back to some of the stuff. And yes, please, I consider Lynwood Unified a learning laboratory, right? A learning
Yes.
laboratory for education leaders, for classroom teachers, for central office administrators, because the level of innovation that is in Lynwood aligns to the economic demand. So you would see not only relationships being undergirded, but also relevancy in the context of developing our students for what I like to say, Delta 2030. And when we talk about moving towards equity, Lynwood, with regards to the equity work, and you have to check out their social justice standards. In theory, you just incorporate those social justice standards to redesign the structures and systems within education, you will automatically get innovation and accelerate it at this exponential level. So please reach out to Dr. Dinkins. I'm telling you, she is my sister. Our last conversation we had, I said, Doc, I'm getting you on quick for this because my listeners need this. But from the bottom of my heart, Dr. Dinkins, thank you so much for being on VFV. And just really fast, if they do want to visit you, how will they be able to reach you, or should they go through your executive assistant, Jessica?
So my executive assistant is Jessica Salazar. 2 ways to reach me where you'll always get a response. The first one is via email. So S Dinkins, Dinkins at mylusd.org. That's number 1. And then our phone number in Lynwood is 310-886-1600, extension 8092. Or you can just ask for educational services, and we are happy to serve. We want all Black and brown students to experience the great things that are happening in Lynwood, not just in our state, but across our country. So we're happy to serve and support. And I am beyond honored that I am in the great company of the Dr. Michael Connor and our admin. We will be using excerpts from your book for some of our professional development this upcoming year in Lynwood. So I'm going to make you more famous. How about that?
Well, listen, I'll take anything I can these days. And Dr. Dinkins, that means so much to me coming from you, the people you associate with at USC, working closely with Dr. Noguera, seeing the work that you're doing, being highlighted in California for it. It's just an honor to have you on here, to consider you my sister and to consider you my friend in the work. We're going to keep on doing it. So,
yes, we are.
Onward and upward, everybody. Thank you for joining. Have a great evening.